everyone. Welcome to Toward a Quality of Life. We're here in the month of May on the 19th at 7 p.m. It's a rainy, relatively cool day, and our weather has been a roller coaster ride for many weeks now in this part of the country, the Northeast, as well in other parts of the country and the world. Which brings me to one of my first and foremost topics that I always must emphasize, reiterate, and drive home, because what else is there, as a matter of fact, if there is no natural environment, and if it doesn't work in its regular own physical, consistent ways, short of the interference of human disruption, human toxicity, and human disturbance. I begin with a phrase used by a member of the Heritage Foundation in a panel discussion given recently on regulation and the environment, and this member was saying that having technology allowed us to see, in essence, allowed us to be able to see the ruination and bad characterization that we are giving to our physical universe. And I'll begin with an answer to that would state that, in fact, technology is our demise. And what a sad statement, or a misperceiving, a skewed kind of statement to be making, that it is technology which allows us to see what the devastation is, and good thing that it's there, but rather that technology, amongst many other of our attitudes and behaviors and habit patterns, is in fact itself a cause of the severe problems, extreme problems that we are experiencing and will continue to experience in worsening degrees into the near future. This, of course, is in line with the person named Mr. Kozinski, who is now in prison for having been convicted of doing bombings around the country, but the idea of his thesis, which many scholars point to as being quite astute indeed, is how critically devastated and impossible it is to continue with technology and have any form of sustainable and proper environment for us. So while we don't appreciate his means to an end, we certainly understand that end by he and so many persons who are speaking out. I saw just a couple of days ago that Prince Charles of England also addressed how horrible man's manipulation of the environment is, and particularly addressed man's manipulation of the natural environment in terms of genetic modification, stating emphatically that the only way we should be trying to improve or change the environment is through natural methods, natural ways of farming, natural ways of working with food and making changes, not through technical and technological and so-called scientific, of the laboratory kind of experiments that manipulate life chemically and not naturally in the natural fields, watching how things grow and planting, maybe making hybrid plants by natural selection with some participation of humankind, and instead we go towards a foolhardy technological abyss. Also think of all the pulses going into the air. That's all we're asking to do on this show, really, is to think, is to stop and think. In fact, I have a long classically oriented song that I composed which is entitled Stop and Think, and maybe someday I'll be performing that. But that's all we're asking, is that we not go headlong, that we not just take for granted and have no kinds of hindsights, foresights, insights, understandings and examinations and reflections on what we're doing. And so think, for example, of the pulses of signals that we are sending in wave packets up to satellites and to other transmitters all through the air, and how much more of that is going into the air every day. Does that have any influence on us? How do we know? These are things we're not even aware of. We're not even aware of what all the waves and vibrations and physical possibilities are of this basically undiscovered, unknown, ununderstood universe. What about all the microwaves of cellular phones? As you know, there's more evidence pushing forward that cellular phones do indeed cause damage to the brain. And if you would stop to think that if one were pulsing a short wave into the brain and changing the ionic distribution of the cellular components, certainly there is going to be some different kind of tissue development and tissue pattern and tissue behavior. All we have to do is make some common sense kinds of reflections and observations, naked kinds of observations of this world around us. Of course, technology is with us so fundamentally, and we certainly will not be bringing it to a halt by anything we would wish for or decry or observe, but yet we should not be so blind. We should certainly be more thinking kind of people, appreciative of what we are doing to ourselves, our universe, and our earth. Another area that there are so many, I always try to bring out a few. Another area that gets spoken about in a commercial, particularly on Sundays with the main television channel news programs, is a commercial, I believe, by ADM, which is hosted by David Brinkley, who talks about, with almost violins playing, though they don't play, we need our cello and violin to think of how gorgeous and how beautiful are these ideas, so to speak, or concepts that he's putting forward, which aren't ideas at all, that we should have increased food production, and with the new kinds of engineering, implicitly, of course, meaning genetic engineering and herbicide, pesticide developments, etc., that goes along with agribusiness and agribusiness farming, if one can call it farming in the traditional sense, that with these methods we are going to be able to feed this hungry world, which has so many people which need the food, and companies such as the one doing the advertising will be able to be delivering. And this is perhaps one story, in as much as people are going full speed ahead, tinkering with nature and coming up, to be sure, with some very adverse results that we will get to know and scratch our heads and wonder why we were so stupid, as it is in human history, when we always look back and wonder why we were so stupid, if we are even capable at that point to be able to look back and have the leisure to think about and do something about why we were so stupid. The naked facts are that companies need to develop new markets, new areas where they can become in control of the agribusiness ventures and use more efficient, that is, cost-benefit analysis, cost-effective ways to squeeze more product out of less money by these engineering and new method techniques, and that the bottom line is really about more money, more land, more control, more venture, and more agri-organization in the hands of persons fundamentally manipulating the chemistry and the environment in the course of least path of cost that they are pursuing, and greatest path of so-called output, the quality and kind of which we won't delve into here, but this is the big question mark, of course. This is the big adversity and scary part. And also whether in fact there should even be such grand organizations of agriculture in other places, and should not the individual farmer be tilling the land, knowing the soil, being prepared for the circumstances by history of experience, understanding how plants grow, not running massive devastating experiments which leave soil eroded, soil ruined, consequential effects on other factors in the environment that are virtually irreparable, and so on in a chain of very nonsensical, short-sighted, and frankly dumb kind of procedure. And I wish these kinds of things, when they're talked about in commercials and elsewhere, would be put more bluntly as to the true goals of economic incentive and economic and aggrandizement and economic meta-organization around the world. Then, of course, in the past week across the country of the United States, there has been an innumerable amount of severe weather, from flooding to tornadoes to severe thunderstorms to fires, and the frequency of it was quite high, and the coincidence of it, one after another in a short period of time, was quite high. And do people ever wonder every night as they see this? It's hard to keep track of which town blew apart. From a tornado, for example, it's hard to even keep track of which houses were just splintered into matchsticks by these odd patterns of weather, inasmuch as they're so sudden often and unpredictable, unforeseen, even in the near term, and so frequent and so higher intensity, relatively speaking, as well. So such unusual patterns. Does it dawn on us to say, whoa, is Mother Nature just standing up and getting crazy? Of course, there is no real Mother Nature. There's no such active agent that is a Mother Nature. Mother Nature is a merely physical chain of knowable, physicalistic connections and associations where A leads to B, cause and effect. And is it not the many things we are doing to the water and to the air, in the contaminations and the pollutions and the changes in temperatures that we are inducing both in the water and in the air, and in the molecular pattern changes perhaps from the radioactive emissions into the air? Can we stop and say, what is it we're doing? And all the chemicals that are changing the gross chemistry of the parts of the earth and the universe? Should we not stop? Should we not stop and just say point blank, whoa, we must be doing some really wrong things, because we are getting some really wrong effects, which are not merely random, which do not make sense by a natural course of events and recent history, relatively recent history, relatively traditional history. If one wants to use that and statistical measures, should we not stop and think? And then, of course, I speak often, I mention genetically modified foods. So bad. I just was speaking of them a couple of minutes ago in connection with agribusiness and its goals. Its goals not of health, not of more people being fed, which is, if you have the money, if you can pay for food, you will eat. If you don't have the money, you won't eat. Genetically modified foods, which can promote the use of combinations of chemicals and plants that both inure to the person behind the proliferation of this kind of research and proselytization of these kinds of foods, which can matter to the bottom line of getting more out of less, quality of it and cost to health and welfare notwithstanding, environmental accidents and devastation notwithstanding, so-called productivity quotients, genetically modified food. What a travesty. And ways to keep food longer, ways to have food be precisely of the texture and shape and color that one wants it in storage for long periods of time. Dead food, not real food. Well, as genetically modified foods go, I just noticed this week that the soybean, about which I've spoken in the past, which has been modified to be able to withstand more Roundup, more poison, more herbicide on it than non-genetically modified soybeans. And that is already planted quite a bit into the ground. It comes packaged as Roundup ready. It's so amazing and alarming. I always seem to be bringing this up. It's so alarming. I saw this week that the University of Nebraska published that in its observations of this plant, it yielded 6% less than relative plants that were not genetically modified, and 11% less than the average of some more robust soybean plants. So already in a generation or two or very few, seeing less yield coming out of this herbicide-resistant plant. And guess what? If the plant is more resistant to Roundup, then it can have more Roundup put on it. And of course all the good bugs die, the good bugs that need to be the worms from these poisons, killing everything that would naturally live in the soil and above the soil. If the plant can stand more poison, that plant has had more poison put onto it and into your supper bowl. Can we think? Can we think? And then we have, I can't recall if it is a Roundup commercial itself, but we've got commercials out there again in this season showing us how we kill living things, and we see frightened weeds trying to hide as this poison is going to make the end of them. This is Mother Earth. This is plant life, and we're going out there. What nuts we are! What nuts we are! Poison-toting, lethal weapon toting of one sort or another, vicious people out there poisoning things which grow in the ground. As I said before, if you don't like some kind of a plant growing in your yard, please pull it up by hand. Please, let's not. It's even been said in the past that it was unsafe for young babies to be crawling on lawns because of the poisons that are put on them. Now, what happens to that land? What happens to anything that would try to grow there ultimately? And what happens to the very life that is being snuffed out of existence? And let's get even more serious. What happens to our shoes and our arms as we roll in these grasses or come back into the house and it's all over the house? Could we think? Could we try to T-H-I-N-K, think? And also, of course, this means that a lot of the indigenous variety of plant life that used to exist is disappearing fast. Right here in New England, right here in Massachusetts, so many kinds of naturally occurring grasses and flowers and bushes and little trees that you could see before we had so much development everywhere are so rare when you come upon them. If you've lived as many decades as I have and can remember, you think, oh, I haven't seen that ever. Even being around the country, I haven't seen that in so many years, some vestiges of plants that will cease to exist. Many, many, many kinds of plants, making for all the gorgeous nuances and varieties and lugubriousnesses of different kinds of fields and trees and forests and natural places that give us hope and inspiration, give us our very breathing capacity, and give us respite and meaning of what this planet, of whence we come, is all about. And then, of course, the trees are cut. The trees, including in the rural areas, people come and scathe the trees. And yet the sun pounds down, and we will likely have many extremely hot days when the sun does shine. And we will need trees. We will need trees to respire, and we will need trees to shade us. And we are cutting them down at an alarming rate. The United States, I believe, has 1/3 less or more, at least, of its trees than it had when it was first a country across the nation. And of course, many of those trees being counted that exist now may be merely farm trees and not true natural trees, not shade trees, not glorious umbrella trees. And the cancer is spreading. And do people stop to think generally, at least in the media, from the most commercial avenues that come to our ears and our eyes? Do we hear about people saying, why is cancer spreading? We must be doing something wrong. These chemicals that we live with, these materials that our clothes are made of, that our shoes are made of, these chemicals in the air that are coming through the vent systems from the plastics and the other kinds of synthetic materials of which our building construction materials are made, these surfaces that our skin rubs against, certainly these foods that we ingest with their various alterations and contaminations, certainly air quality and so forth and so on, are contributing to why our bodies are going awry. More people statistically, constantly, as we move into the future, younger ages, children. Why does the body go awry? Why do things in the body go ways that are not healthy but are irregular or regular, considering, functionally speaking, the harm that is being done to them? That's the question. And the question is not, as I see, people saying maintain a positive attitude, keeping a stiff upper lip. Of course those things are necessary, and something like this can happen to any or all of us. But how much more direct and poignant to think, why should we all be getting this kind of disease? And why should the focus only be on, let me see which therapy I will choose? Therapies which in and of themselves cause great harm. Oh, get the disease, now get the commodity therapy that has to be paid for. But do not think, why are more and more people coming down with cancer all the time as we move into the near future? And why look to the ignominious facets of life, such as everyday elements in the diet, as I've said before, that may naturally occur. You can't tell what, you can't really say naturally, because all of our foods are so not just the way they would occur naturally. Why look at just the mundane things about causes of cancer? Why not look at what we are producing in our factories, from our exhaust pipes, in our explorations for carbons under the sea? Why don't we look for the materials that men are making and producing and using and ingesting and having as an integral part of human life? Why don't we look to those when we wonder about cancer? Technology, all the new technologically developed changes, material changes. What about one's eyesight sitting in front of a computer screen for hours on end? Are we going to stop doing that? No, we're not. Should we think, however, instead of just doing it blindly, no pun intended, that while we're sitting here, we are straining our eyes and we are hurting our eyes. We are literally hurting our vision. Check it out if people do not develop vision problems, to say the least of back strain problems, etc. Why can't we think about these things instead of being full speed ahead, gung-ho on things that have serious health and welfare consequences? What about men balding? Someone pointed out to me the other day that a very senior person was saying how sitting around watching people in public come and go, he was thinking how astounding it is that such young males have balding in such frequency, something he never saw as far as he could recollect when he was in that age category or even older, like a new phenomenon, and this could be true, that more males are losing more hair at an earlier age. And something that has been said to be true, so to speak statistically, is that across the world, sterility is going up. Literally, sterility is going up. That may match somewhat with patterns of balding. As Neil Young would say, don't let it get you down. It's only castles burning. Just find someone who's turning, and you will come around. It's not to be down anyway. It's just to be, why can't we think of these things? Why is everything just gung-ho no matter what it is? If it's bad for us, if it's stupid, if it's dumb to be doing, and yet entrenching more and more of these kinds of things into our life. And of course, I took a road trip recently, and of course, now that it's spring, animals, dead animals coming out of the woods litter the highway left and right. A very unsound panorama for people young and old, but imagine the things that work on the psyche of our very young children, things they don't think about because they come born into these things. This is just par for the course. These are just one of the many kinds of death, anti-life, anti-beautiful, anti-nice, anti-convivial, and anti-cute kind of things among many that are just part and parcel of the fabric of life. And yet we keep on cutting pathways where there aren't any, cutting pathways through trees so that animals will have to be crossing, have no place to live, and get slaughtered. We keep cutting pathways. We should in fact be thinking about moratoriums on development across the whole land. We should be thinking about stopping everything until we give some serious consideration to the serious effects of what we are doing namby-pamby. Now, I always like to read to you, or not read to you, I should say, excuse me. I always like to talk to you about something about animals as well, because besides the urgency and the alarming need for us to do an about-face of where we are with our earth and our environment. The very other deep, almost primarily deep, because it involves sentient feeling, suffering of real creatures that feel pain and experience an untenable and unfathomable suffering. I like to talk to you about these animals. They are the animals, for the most part, everywhere, but for the most part in the laboratory, in the laboratory. And today, I'm going to read you something, the likes of which most of this stuff about animals in labs and research is so difficult to attend to, and so difficult to read if it's reading, and certainly so difficult to view firsthand or think about, that one has to stay away from it. One has to deny it out of existence. And of course, many of us haven't been exposed to it in any way, shape, or form, and so what we don't know can't really get to us. But if we did know, because people love animals so, we would be so sick, we wouldn't know what to do, how to relieve ourselves of fathoming that such a thing as animal research exists in this world. And it exists not only in the United States, it exists in virtually all the countries of the world in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to read to you one of thousands and thousands of numbing, nauseating, inarticulable realities. And this one comes from the International Primate Protection League, and I frequently have the address of this organization at the end of my show once I edit this show, and I always urge people to write to this organization and also the Society for Protective Animal Legislation. This organization deals with primates, and the other deals with all species of animals. And they also say this is not to be in an organization and spend money, which one does not have to do. It is to write to these organizations so that they send you their newsletters and alert you to what's going on, and then you can help in the letter writing campaigns, which do have an effect. And this article was in the April issue of the year 2000, and it's called Kenya Closes Baboon Farm. And you won't see here, but maybe for the edited edition, I will have the picture of the baboon in the restraint apparatus, reminiscent of any living life that has been martyred and skewered. And I will read to you what it says. On 10 March 2000, the Kenya Wildlife Department shut down the premises of a primate exporter, Richard Mann, just 5 days after he was exposed by the British newspaper, The Mail, on Sunday. Baboons awaiting export were ordered released. And the Mail, which is M-A-I-L, which is the name of the newspaper, carried the following headline across 2 pages. Captured in the wild, these baboons wait to be flown to Britain, where their hearts will be removed and replaced by organs from genetically modified pigs. Ladies and gentlemen, if that is not using life like you use a rag to sop the floor and squeeze it out and throw it away, I don't know what is using life. Ladies and gentlemen, baboons taken from the wild to be flown to Britain out of Kenya, knowing, cognizant, aware creatures taken out of the wild, where their hearts will be removed and replaced by organs from genetically modified pigs for these altruistic motives of genetically modified organs so that people can ultimately be receiving modified organs transplanted to their bodies. We are going to use these animals, remove their hearts, put other ones in, play around, see what we can do. It happens to be a baboon. The baboon got in the way. The baboon got in the way. Life got in the way. People got in the way. Technology is there, and people and life and creatures get in the way. Then they will die. Why is this medical experiment, yet to save a single human life, kept secret by law? To quote the newspaper, the male investigators reported on their inspection of the animal dealing compound the company had been exporting primates from Kenya for decades. They described the scene, the reporters for the newspaper, the investigators. The screams are what you hear first. Piercing, prolonged, and almost human, the screams of mothers and babies. Somewhere inside the well-protected hidden compound, baboons abducted from their natural habitat in the wide open veld are railing against their capture, some battering their heads against the bars of tiny cages. According to the newspaper, the baboons were scheduled to be flown to a medical laboratory near Cambridge where their organs will be surgically removed and replaced with those of pigs. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you biotech. I give you companies promoting genetically modified organs, cloned organs, cloned creatures. I give you genetic research on life. I give you biotech. I give you Wall Street. Ladies and gentlemen, pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Some will have pig organs attached to the outsides of their bodies. This is all in the purpose of research to study, I would think, whether they will be accepted or rejected, etc., etc. According to the newspaper, a research facility located in Cambridge, England, had earlier sent a charter plane to Kenya to collect 28 baboons. The aim is to find a way to make pigs' organs suitable as spare parts for humans. Now, mind you, when IPPL is putting this in its magazine, reproducing it, it's doing this because its intent is to protect primates, of which baboons are a part. Of course it knows how untenable and unacceptable and unfathomable this travesty, savagery, and sacrilege is against life. Thank goodness not mine right now. Oh no, just the baboons next to me. The newspaper had trouble getting details because of a law which makes disclosure of experiments an offense in Britain. However, the reporters learned that during 1999, 10 baboons received pigs' hearts. Oh, we need some hearts. Let's get them from Kenya. There's a guy in Kenya who will sell us some. Grab the baboons screaming, get them over to England, into the laboratory, throw them in a cage, pull them out, put them on the operating table, under who knows what kinds of circumstances or attitude, no family there to watch and protect. Get rid of their heart, cut that out, put another one in, see what happens. When you're done, get rid of the baboon. You didn't need him in the first place. He happened to be alive. He was a thing, or she was a thing that you could use. In 1999, 10 baboons received the pig's hearts. 5 died within 18 hours. 4 more were dead within 5 days. And let me tell you what kind of death, and let me tell you what kind of agony on the way to death before they were even operated on. Five died within 18 hours, 4 more dead within 5 days, and the survivor was killed after 9 days. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Then the newspaper said another experiment involved transplanting pigs' hearts into monkeys' abdomens. Some of these animals died within 3 hours. The longest that a baboon has lived with a pig's heart is 40 days. Hurrah for science! Great achievement! Present yourself to the CNBC financial show and explain to them how the company is making progress in its laudable and lofty quest to create animal parts that can be transplanted into human bodies. Where is the respect for death? Human death? Where is the respect for not only life, but life in its mortality? During their visit to Kenya, the investigators found that inadequate records were kept at the airport and so forth, and this is about how the animals were shipped in ways that were not up to snuff regarding regulations. In 1999, the government of Kenya had raided this compound after learning from U.S. researchers that the baboons were arriving in poor condition. In other words, something was being done very poorly before they were even leaving Kenya. Their life circumstances were very wrong, such that they were arriving in terrible shape by the time they got to the U.S. And those baboons that the U.S. people commented on from this same compound in Kenya were as was commented by someone from the Wildlife Department in Kenya, a lot of baboons with wounds which would have been caused either because they were not captured humanely or because they deliberately bashed their heads on the sides of the cage out of frustration. They were baking in the sun with no proper shade, virtually no water or food. They looked dehydrated, and they were all terrified. If you were at the hands of humans, would you not be terrified? Baboons are very sociable animals, but they had been held for 3 months, separated in these cages. I was disgusted, and I compiled a report commending that this compound not receive another permit. Then, in the year 2000, the newspaper reports, under a scorching sun, more than this is in Kenya now, back to Kenya. Under a scorching sun, more than 100 baboons were confined, each in a tiny 4 by 3 foot tin roofed cage with a wire floor. Each had a small container of water and the remains of a few corn cobs lying on the floor. One adult female had a gash above her eye. The investigator was appalled by the sight of a baby mother holding her tiny baby and cowering in the corner of her cage. And so forth and so on. And then it gets into the legalities of how these baboons are shipped, where they are doing things improperly, and what kinds of actions have to be taken. So the baboons, lucky critters that they are, get to be inhumanely, ravagingly treated by being captured and being held in Kenya itself, only to be flown to England in, again, a tiny cage as big as they, to arrive, to go into another cage in a laboratory, and then get a surgery and get their heart taken out, and then have a pig's heart put in or some other organ attached to their body, see how long they'll live, die an agonizing death, or else get killed and thrown away. Can words say it? Words can't say it. These things go without saying. They are, to use a phrase, self-evident. Yet unfortunately, they've got to be talked about. And unfortunately, the doors and panels of discussion and wherewithal to be fomenting this topic is not available, is more sealed and more out of the public eye than ever, less available to an open discussion, less available to an open analysis, less available to an increased understanding and appreciation for the horror that exists at this moment and every minute and every hour behind mightily closed, locked, bolted doors. Ladies and gentlemen, please, when you see addresses to help the animals, any kind of activity, or talk to people, please make your efforts heard to write a letter or to think about these things. What about the animals? Progress for science. What about the animals? What about the poor so-called subjects that have to endure what this thing is that is called science and biotech? What about them? What is going on? And thank your lucky stars for this life, this time that you're here on earth at least, that you are not one of those hapless animals, and hope that you will never be in that position. Ladies and gentlemen, please help animals. And ladies and gentlemen, let the animals go. Leave life alone. Leave animal life alone. And leave natural life alone. Let us be more natural and close to the truth of our natural birthright. Now, on a separate subject, which is in the news lately, that I thought I'd make some brief comment on, the subject of Microsoft and its breakup or possible breakup. I know that some people are highly favorable to Microsoft being left untouched because it brought us our operating system. It brought us a standard of how to have this operating system. And may all wealth and power and benefit accrue to he that can make his way to be in that position, which is the United States capitalist way. But on the other hand, I just had some thoughts of my own about this, of course, some of which I won't get into now because we're leaving this time slot shortly. regarding the distribution of wealth and the limits or unlimits to growth, and monopolistic enterprise, and even technology itself, computers themselves. But one thought I had just on a personal experiential level, I happened to be looking around at computers recently, seeing if I would be purchasing an upgrade, so to speak, and I went around and looked at what the latest is, and it dawned on me, since this Microsoft legal situation, how every single thing about computers that I looked at all began with Microsoft. Everywhere I looked, the only thing that would come up on the screen all the time was Microsoft, and it began to dawn on me. Yes, how is it that every time it's Microsoft coming up in front of oneself, in control, in command, in charge of that platform, if you will. And then when you go to the icons on the desktop page of what you'd like to choose, all roads lead to Microsoft, and they're also leading very much to AT&T, but you begin to recognize how much the field is sewn up, and you begin to recognize how there could be possibilities for other players, other minds, other ideas, other ways of doing things, other options, other possibilities for what has come about to date. And yet, if you think about it, all roads do lead to Microsoft. And as someone was telling me, one of the things that Microsoft did, I don't know if it's part of the lawsuit along the way, was to always buy out different ideas or possible competitions and then shelve them and just continue with Microsoft's line of producing what it produces. So there does seem to be some merit, when you stop to think about it, of how entrenched just one brand, one way, one humanly designed and humanly owned and humanly controlled enterprise could be responsible for, and the interface for everything human beings do virtually. And the other thing I noticed, which is just another personal thing, it sort of has to do with computers as well, is how in this techno world, and in this world that is so computerized and that is following you and marketing on you and trailing you and codifying you and getting profiles on you and tagging down every aspect that could have any financial value to those people that can be monitoring what your patterns are and what kind of things you can and will have to pay for in this computerized world. You'll notice how giving up information about yourself and having to give things up before you even talk to people or sign on to things or try things is getting more intricate and more prevalent all the time. And so I was talking to one company, which is a .com company, but I called them on the telephone. I still love to talk to people. Personally, I really love spontaneity. That's what I love. I believe in spontaneity, and I really get off on just the interchange of humans in motion, and I certainly love talking instead of being at a distance. And I learn things and get the hang of things by watching people firsthand or having them tell me sooner than I do by instructions. So anyway, I was talking to a .com company on the phone, just asking a question that had nothing to do with me opening the account or becoming a customer or anything, just a theoretical, need-to-know, informational kind of question that had nothing to do with anything. And in order to answer the question, the representative at the other end of the line wanted to know my name, my address, my telephone number. And I said, why? Can you just answer this question? And you know this happens to many of you so often, so you know how it is. And this person said, oh, because we want to have a history on you, so that the next time you call, we'll know what you said and so on. And I say, I don't want you to have a history on me. I want my freedom. I want my spontaneity. I don't want you to know what I said before, and then maybe have me, and then categorize me, pocket me as a customer that asks about this so you can market to me on this, or as a customer that asks about that so you can count the number of times I asked you a question which you wish I wouldn't ask you so many times. I don't want you having a history on me. You don't know me, you don't care about me, you don't love me, you don't need me, you need my money. You shouldn't be knowing anything about me. You are a stranger to me. I am merely a bit of information. And the interesting part, too, was that this apparently young girl who was at the other end could not understand why I wouldn't want to do this. Couldn't get the idea. Seeing no trouble in people giving themselves up, as I said earlier. Can we think? Can we think? Can we be free agents and use our brain? People are having less and less trouble just doggedly coming under the umbrella of Microsoft and doggedly coming under the umbrella of all coordinators of what your entertainment and life and quality and food and nature and everything is going to be. Those are my last comments for the evening, and I do appreciate you tuning in. Please come out and see me perform sometime. You'll see listings at the end of my show as they occur. When they do happen, they'll be posted. Please look at the animal addresses at the end of the show. And thank you ever so much. This program has been brought to you by Mroczek Psychology Consultation. Thank you, good evening, and thank you very much to Lita Booth, who's in the control room as usual, making this show happen. Good night.